And let's talk about, I know we're coming up on time here, but let's talk about meeting Neil. I know you guys connected on Match.com in 2016. How did that change everything?
Well, let's see. Yeah, you can, if you just Google Anne Lamott Match, you can read the story of my life on Match before I met Neil, which was that I learned how to date. I didn't feel like I was desperate for a partner. I was so glad to be out of the last relationship, and it had been a few years. And I really love being single. I happen to love being alone, really more than anything. I'm really an introvert. But I learned how to date, and I learned how to have coffee with people and then get out of having to see them again. And I learned again not to give up. And then this guy appeared on my in the Match, the daily six, and he was really good looking. He was incredibly smart, possibly overeducated, and he really is. It's kind of an issue for us, and he's kind of a know-it-all, and very spiritual, and he had a nice sense of humor. And I wrote to him, and it turned out he was allergic to cats, and I live with cats. I always will, and there's no way I could have survived the last 4 years without my cat. And so I thought, well, I can't be with you because I'd always have to come to your house since you couldn't come to mine. And at my house is my son and grandson and my cat. And so naturally, and my dog, and I naturally want to be there. But then he said that he had discovered, he's highly allergic. He had discovered if you put brewer's yeast on the cat's kibble, that after a week or two, he wouldn't be allergic anymore, or just mildly. And I thought, oh, he's just trying to get me into bed, or he's got a manuscript he wants me to read, because men that I dated had shown up on their first date, one with a manuscript and one on our second date with a plot treatment, as God is my witness. And he didn't have either. He just wanted to talk to a kindred spirit who was really smart and not educated. I'm a dropout, and really spiritual with a nice sense of humor. So I agreed to have a cup of coffee with him. But I set it up so that I could only stay an exact hour because I had to do an errand across town, which was to get a Craigslist IKEA cabinet for my grandchild. And so we had this hour, and we just grokked each other, to use that great phrase from Stranger in a Strange Land. And we jammed. He knew all the movies that had changed my life. He knew all about, you know, everything I love to talk about, books and movies and God and Hinduism and then I said, I have to go. I have an errand to do. And he said, an errand? I love errands. That was how I stayed with my wife. They'd been separate, divorced for 5 years. He said, that's why I stayed with her. We had so much fun when we did errands. So he got in my car and we drove across town and did an errand together. And we haven't missed a day and coming up on 5 years. So we got married a couple years ago. He wanted to get married, and we had lost our cat. And one day we were watching the U.S. Open and, tennis matches, and he said, eating Cheetos or something. And he said, "Can I ask you a question?" I said, "Oh, sure." I thought we were getting some patio pebble in one little patch of the garden. I said, "Oh, sure." I thought he wanted to talk about whether I wanted to go dark or light. And he said, "Will you marry me?" I said, "What?" And then I said, "Could we get another cat?" And he said, "Sure." I said, "Okay, I'll marry you." And then we got married about 6 months, 8 months later, because there was a redwood grove right down the street that was available on April 13th, 2021. And we got married 3 days after I got Medicare and Social Security. We had a beautiful wedding. However, I didn't know that if I was going to be married 2 years, one of them was going to be in quarantine, So I feel I get extra credit.
How has that been, being home together and being in a tight knit space?
Well, just like all of life, some days are just too long, and most days have been really nice. He works at on his book and his website, Shapes of Truth, and I'm in a bat cave. He has a Shapes of Truth bat cave, and I'm over here in this funny little office. And so I'm usually glad to see him when we meet up in the kitchen. I'm always glad to see him at night, and we're hooked on these really dark Nordic thrillers. And I'm always really happy to wake up in the morning because he's a genuinely sweet guy. So, and then some days I'll hear him chewing bacon, that kind of wet, crunchy sound, and I'll feel like I can't do this. I'm sorry. And I'll think it's so unfair that Protestants can't get an annulment. And then I'll sort of slog through that. And then he'll do something he's very thoughtful. He'll do something so funny and thoughtful that hadn't crossed my mind. And it'll just make me laugh and get my sense of humor back.